The red warning lights flickered across the control panel as Lee Jiho wiped sweat from his forehead. Another long night shift in the depths of Nexus Station was almost over. The massive space station hummed around him like a sleeping giant. Thousands of aliens from dozens of different worlds lived and worked above his head, but down here in the maintenance levels, Jiho worked alone. He preferred it this way. The quiet gave him time to think while he fixed the endless problems that kept the station running. Tonight, the atmospheric processors in Section 7 were acting up again. The old machines needed constant attention, and Jiho was one of the few engineers who understood their quirky behavior. Jiho grabbed his toolkit and headed down the dimly lit corridor. His footsteps echoed off the metal walls as he made his way to the lower decks. These areas had been abandoned for months now. Budget cuts meant that only the essential areas got regular maintenance. The rest were left to slowly decay in the darkness. The atmospheric processor room was at the end of a long hallway lined with empty storage units. Most of these had been sealed off years ago when the station expanded upward instead of outward. Jiho had been down here many times before, but tonight something felt different. As he approached the processor room, he heard a sound that made him stop. It was soft, almost like a whisper, but definitely not the usual mechanical noises he was used to. Jiho paused and listened carefully. There it was again. A gentle scratching sound followed by what might have been a quiet voice. Jiho felt his heart beat faster. He was supposed to be alone down here. The security systems showed no unauthorized personnel in this section. Maybe it was just the old pipe settling, or maybe a small maintenance robot had gotten lost, but something told him it was neither of these things. He moved forward slowly, his hand hovering over the emergency communicator on his belt. The sound was coming from one of the sealed storage units about 20 meters ahead. The door to Unit 247 was slightly open, which was strange because all these units were supposed to be locked tight. As Jiho got closer, he could see a faint light coming from inside the unit. Not the harsh white light of the station's standard fixtures, but something softer and warmer. He could hear voices now, definitely voices, speaking in low tones in a language he did not recognize. Jiho stopped just outside the door and listened. There were at least 3 different voices, maybe 4. One sounded older and tired. Another was higher-pitched like a young person. And there was a third that was very quiet and seemed worried about something. The 4th voice was the smallest and weakest of all. Taking a deep breath, Jiho slowly pushed the door open a little wider and peered inside. What he saw made him freeze in place. 4 figures sat huddled together in the corner of the small storage room. They were clearly not human, but they were not like any of the alien species Jiho had seen on the station before. They looked somewhat like cats, but they walked upright on 2 legs like people. Their fur was pale, almost white, and seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Their eyes were large and violet-colored, and they watched Jiho with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. The largest of the 4, clearly an adult, moved protectively in front of the others. This one had longer fur around what might have been a mane, suggesting it was male. Beside him sat another adult, smaller and more delicate-looking, probably female. Behind them were 2 younger ones, one that looked like a teenager and another that was clearly just a child. They all looked thin and tired. Their pale fur was dirty and matted in places. The smallest one, the child, was lying down with its head in the lap of the female adult. Even from the doorway, Jiho could see that the little one was sick. For a long moment, nobody moved. The alien family stared at Jiho and he stared back at them. Then the male adult said something in their language that sounded like a question. His voice was deep but gentle, not threatening at all. Jiho realized he was still holding his toolkit, which might look like a weapon to these frightened beings. He slowly set it down on the floor and raised his hands to show they were empty. "I am not going to hurt you," he said softly, even though he knew they probably could not understand him. The female adult said something to the male, and they had a quiet conversation in their musical language. The teenage one kept looking at Jiho with curious eyes, while the child remained still and quiet. Jiho could see that they had made a small camp in the storage unit. There were some makeshift blankets that looked like they had been torn from larger pieces of fabric. A few empty food containers were stacked neatly in one corner. Everything was clean and organized despite their obviously desperate situation. "How long have you been here?" Jiho asked, knowing they would not understand but feeling like he needed to say something. The male adult seemed to recognize that Jiho was not hostile. He pointed to himself and said something that sounded like Nail. Then he pointed to the female and said Kira. The teenager was Somi, and the sick child was Duri. Jiho pointed to himself. Jiho, he said. Lee Jiho. Nail nodded and repeated Lee Jiho with a slight accent. Then he said something longer in his own language and made gestures with his hands. Jiho could not understand the words, but the meaning was clear enough. They were asking for help. Looking at the small family huddled together in their makeshift shelter, Jiho felt something stir in his chest. These beings were clearly refugees of some kind, hiding in the abandoned parts of the station because they had nowhere else to go. The sick child, Duri, needed medical attention that they obviously could not afford or access. Jiho knew that helping unauthorized aliens was against station regulations. It could cost him his job and possibly land him in serious legal trouble. But looking at little Duri, pale and weak in his mother's arms, Jiho knew he could not just walk away and pretend he had never seen them. "Wait here," he said, making calming gestures with his hands. "I will be back." He picked up his toolkit and hurried back toward the maintenance areas where he kept his supplies. In his emergency kit, he had food synthesizers, basic medical supplies, and water purification tablets. It was not much, but it would help. As Jiho gathered the supplies, his mind raced with questions. Who were these pale cat people? How had they gotten onto the station? Why were they hiding in the abandoned sections? And most importantly, what was he going to do about them? One thing was certain. He could not leave them there to suffer alone in the dark. Lee Jiho returned to Storage Unit 247, carrying a small bag filled with emergency supplies. His hands shook slightly as he approached the door. He had never broken station rules before, especially not ones this serious. But the image of the sick child would not leave his mind. The pale cat family was still huddled in the same corner when he pushed the door open. All 4 pairs of violet eyes turned toward him with a mixture of hope and fear. The male, Nael, stood up slowly and positioned himself between Jiho and his family. Even though he was clearly weak from hunger, he was ready to protect them. Jiho held up the bag and opened it slowly, showing them the contents. Inside were 3 food synthesizer packets, a basic medical kit, and several bottles of clean water. He set the bag down carefully and stepped back, giving them space. Kira, the female adult, said something to Nael in their musical language. She sounded desperate and hopeful at the same time. Nael looked at the supplies, then at Jiho, then back at his sick child. After a moment of hesitation, he moved forward and carefully picked up one of the water bottles. He examined it closely, turning it over in his hands. These beings were clearly intelligent. Nael figured out how to open the bottle and took a small sip. His large violet eyes widened with relief. The water was clean and safe. Nael quickly brought the bottle to his child, Duri, who was still lying weakly in Kira's lap. The little one drank slowly, and some color seemed to return to his pale fur. Kira stroked Duri's head gently and whispered something that sounded like a lullaby. Jiho watched as Nael shared the water with the rest of his family. Then the alien father looked at Jiho and spoke in his own language. Though Jiho could not understand the words, the tone was clear. Nael was thanking him. "You are welcome," Jiho said softly. He pointed to the food synthesizers and made eating motions with his hands. "Food. For you." Somi, the teenage daughter, seemed more curious than afraid. She stood up and moved closer to examine the food packets. She was taller than Jiho had first thought, nearly as tall as a human adult, but still had the slim build of someone young. Her fur was cleaner than the others, suggesting she had been trying to take care of herself despite their difficult situation. Somi picked up one of the food synthesizers and studied it carefully. These devices were common throughout the galaxy, but each species had their own versions. She seemed to understand what it was, though. She showed it to her parents and they had a quick conversation. Kira nodded and Somi activated the device. A small portion of nutritious paste appeared in the container. It was not delicious, but it was safe for most alien species to eat and provided essential nutrients. Somi tasted it carefully, then smiled and said something to her family. As they shared the emergency food, Jiho sat down near the door. He did not want to crowd them or make them feel trapped. He pulled out his personal translator device, a small unit that could handle basic communication between different species. It was not perfect, but it might help them talk. Can you understand me now? Jiho asked, speaking into the device. It made soft beeping sounds as it processed his words and converted them into something the alien family might recognize. Nail tilted his head and listened carefully. Then his eyes lit up with understanding. He said something back and the translator worked to convert his words into human speech. You help us. Why? Came the mechanical voice from the translator. The words were simple, but the meaning behind them was clear. Because you need help, Jiho answered. And because it is the right thing to do. The translator hummed as it converted his response. Nail listened, then said something longer. The device struggled a bit but managed to translate most of it. We are Villani, our homeworld gone. We look for new home. But no one wants us, Jiho felt his heart sink. These were refugees. People who had lost everything and were looking for somewhere safe to live. What happened to your world? He asked. Kira spoke this time, her voice sad and tired. The translator picked up her words. Great storms from space. They destroyed everything, many died. We escaped with our children. How long have you been here on the station? Jiho asked. Many days, Nail replied through the translator. We had small money for docking fee. But money gone now. Security said we must leave, but we have no ship, no place to go. Jiho began to understand their situation. They had come to Nexus Station as refugees, probably hoping to find work or at least temporary shelter. But without money for the expensive docking fees, they had been forced to leave their assigned quarters. With nowhere else to go, they had hidden in the abandoned sections of the station. Why do they not want you? Jiho asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Somi spoke up this time, her young voice carrying a note of sadness. The translator converted her words. They say we bring bad luck. Our pale fur, they think it means death and sadness. They afraid of us. Jiho had heard of such superstitions before. Throughout the galaxy, different species had beliefs about what brought good or bad fortune. Apparently, the Villani's pale appearance made other aliens uncomfortable. That is foolish, Jiho said firmly. You are just people trying to survive. Little Duri had been listening to the conversation. He was feeling better after the water and food, and now he sat up in his mother's lap. He looked at Jiho with wide, curious eyes and said something in their language. Kira smiled for the first time since Jiho had found them. She translated her son's words. He asks if you are an angel. In our stories, angels are beings who help others when no one else will. Jiho felt embarrassed. I am just an engineer. I fix machines and keep the air clean. To us, you are angel, Nail said simply. Over the next hour, Jiho learned more about the Villani family. Nail had been a storyteller on their homeworld, traveling from city to share tales and songs. Kira had worked as a healer, using her knowledge of plant medicines to help people. Somi was a gifted student who loved learning about mathematics and science. Little Duri was only 6 years old and missed playing with his friends. They had escaped their dying world on a refugee transport ship with hundreds of other Villani families. But the other families had scattered across different systems, and Nail's family had ended up here on Nexus Station, with very little money and no connections to help them. What is wrong with Duri? Jiho asked, noticing that the child was still weak despite the food and water. Kira looked worried as she explained through the translator. It is common sickness for Villani children. On our world, easy to cure with proper medicine. But here, the medicine costs too much money. Jiho made a mental note to research Villani medical needs. As an engineer, he had access to the station's medical databases. Maybe he could find information about what Duri needed. I will come back tomorrow, Jiho told them. I will bring more food and water. And maybe I can find medicine for Duri. The family looked at each other with something that might have been hope. They had been alone and afraid for so long that Jiho's kindness seemed almost too good to believe. Why you do this for us? Kira asked. You not know us. We different species. Jiho thought about his answer carefully. Because we are not so different. You love your children. You want them to be safe and healthy. You work hard to take care of your family. These things make you the same as humans. As Jiho prepared to leave, little Duri walked over to him. The child was still unsteady on his feet, but he reached up and gently touched Jiho's hand with his small pale fingers. He said something in Villani that sounded like a blessing or a prayer. He says thank you for being kind to strangers, Somi translated, and he hopes the universe brings you happiness in return. Walking back through the empty corridors, Jiho knew his life had just become much more complicated. But looking back at the warm light coming from Storage Unit 247, he also knew he had made the right choice. 3 weeks had passed since Lee Jiho first discovered the Villani family hiding in Storage Unit 247. What started as emergency help had grown into something much bigger. Every night after his regular maintenance work, Jiho would visit the family with supplies and spend time talking with them through his translator. The small storage unit was no place for a family to live. It was cramped, cold, and had no proper facilities for washing or cooking. Jiho had been thinking about this problem for days when he remembered Maintenance Bay 15 in the lower engineering section. Bay 15 had been unused for over a year. It was larger than the storage unit, with its own power supply and water connections. Most importantly, it was in a section that security rarely visited because all the equipment there was marked as non-essential. On a quiet Tuesday night, Jiho made his decision. He found the Villani family sharing their evening meal of synthesized food in their cramped hiding place. "I have an idea," he told them through the translator. "There is a better place for you to stay. It is bigger and safer." Nail looked worried. Moving meant risk. If they were discovered while traveling through the station corridors, they would certainly be caught and deported. "Where is this place?" Kira asked. "It is in the engineering section. Nobody goes there except me. You will have more room, and I can install proper sleeping areas and washing facilities." Somi, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "What if someone finds us?" "The room is marked as containing broken equipment," Jiho explained. "Other engineers think it is full of junk that nobody wants. They will not look inside." Little Duri, who was feeling much better thanks to the medicine Jiho had managed to obtain, tugged on his father's sleeve. He whispered something in Villani. Nail smiled and translated for Jiho. "He asks if the new place has windows. He misses seeing stars." Jiho's heart ached for the child. "Yes, there is a small window that looks out into space. You will be able to see the stars." That night, they carefully moved the family to Maintenance Bay 15. Jiho went first to make sure the corridors were empty, then signaled for them to follow. They moved quietly through the dimly lit passages, carrying their few belongings. When Jiho opened the door to the maintenance bay, the family gasped in wonder. Compared to the tiny storage unit, this space seemed huge. There were workbenches, tool storage areas, and enough room for everyone to move around comfortably. "This will be your new home," Jiho said. Over the following days, Jiho worked to transform the maintenance bay into a proper living space. He installed a small hydroponics unit where Kira could grow some of the healing plants she remembered from her home world. He set up sleeping areas with real mattresses he had quietly requisitioned from the station's surplus supplies. The small window that looked out into space became Duri's favorite spot. The child would spend hours there, watching the stars and the ships that came and went from the station. Sometimes he would draw pictures of the things he saw, using art supplies that Jiho had brought him. As the family settled into their new home, Jiho began to learn more about Villani culture and abilities. Kira was not just a healer. She was a biochemist with an incredible understanding of how different substances could be combined to create medicines. She showed Jiho how certain common station plants could be processed to create powerful healing compounds. On our world, we did not have the big factories that other species use to make medicine, Kira explained one evening as she worked with her plants. We learned to find healing in the things that grow around us. Jiho was amazed by her knowledge. Some of the compounds she created were more effective than the expensive medicines sold in the station's medical centers. Nail, meanwhile, was not just a storyteller. He was an artist who could create beautiful things from almost nothing. Using discarded materials from the engineering sections, he made sculptures and decorations that filled their new home with beauty and warmth. One evening, Jiho arrived to find Nail working on a large sculpture made from twisted metal and colored lights. When it was finished, it looked like a tree from the Villani homeworld, with branches that seemed to dance in an invisible wind. "It is beautiful," Jiho said, staring at the artwork. "It is a memory tree," Nail explained. "In our culture, we make these to remember the good times from our past while we build new good times in the present." Somi proved to be just as remarkable as her parents. The teenage Villani had a natural gift for mathematics and engineering that impressed even Jiho. She could look at complex technical problems and see solutions that had escaped him. "How do you do that?" Jiho asked one night after Somi had helped him solve a particularly difficult atmospheric processing problem. I do not know, Somi said shyly. Numbers and patterns just make sense to me. They are like a language that speaks about how things work. Jiho began bringing her technical manuals and engineering problems to work on. Somi would study them carefully and often suggest improvements to the station's systems that were both brilliant and practical. Little Duri was also special in his own way. Despite being only 6 years old, he had a wonderful ability to bring joy to everyone around him. He would sing Villani songs that sounded like wind chimes dancing in the breeze. He would draw pictures that captured emotions as much as images, and he had an endless curiosity about everything around him. Jiho, why do some people not like us because we are pale? Duri asked one evening as they sat by the window looking at the stars. It was a difficult question to answer. Some people are afraid of things that are different from them, Jiho said carefully. But being different is not bad. It just means you have special qualities that other people do not have. Do you think we are different in a good way or a bad way? The child asked. I think you are different in a wonderful way, Jiho replied honestly. As the weeks passed, the family began to feel like they had a real home again. But Jiho was facing challenges of his own. His frequent absences from his regular work areas were starting to attract attention from his co-workers. Park Minho, his supervisor, had noticed that Jiho was often tired during his shifts and seemed distracted. Several times Minho had asked about the extra power usage in the lower engineering sections, though Jiho had managed to explain it away as necessary for equipment testing. Even more concerning was the attention from Captain Huang Yuna, the station's security chief. Yuna was known for her sharp eyes and her ability to spot anything unusual happening on the station. Twice she had asked Jiho about his work schedule and why he was spending so much time in areas that were supposed to be abandoned. Just routine maintenance, Jiho had told her. Those old systems need regular checking to make sure they do not cause problems for the rest of the station. Yuna had accepted his explanation, but Jiho could see suspicion in her eyes. He knew it was only a matter of time before someone discovered what he was really doing. Despite the growing danger, Jiho could not bring himself to regret his decision to help the Villani family. Every evening when he entered their hidden home and saw their faces light up with joy, he knew he was doing the right thing. Kira would greet him with a warm smile and show him the new medicines she had created. Nail would share stories from Villani culture or show off his latest artwork. Somi would excitedly explain a new engineering concept she had discovered, and little Duri would run to him with a drawing or a song he wanted to share. They had become more than just aliens he was helping. They had become his friends, and in some ways they felt like family. But as Jiho lay in his own quarters late at night, he worried about what would happen when their secret was finally discovered. Station regulations were clear about unauthorized aliens, and the penalties for harboring them were severe. He could lose his job, face criminal charges, and be banned from working on any galactic facility. But worse than that, the Villani family would be sent to a detention center where they would wait months or even years for their asylum case to be heard. The thought of Duri locked in a cold detention facility, unable to see the stars, made Jiho's stomach turn. Whatever happened, he had to find a way to protect them. As he drifted off to sleep, Jiho made a promise to himself. He would keep the family safe no matter what it cost him personally. They had already lost one home. He would not let them lose another. Captain Huang Yuna knew something was wrong. After 15 years working station security, she had developed a sense for when people were hiding things. And Li Jiho was definitely hiding something. For weeks, she had been tracking unusual power consumption patterns in the lower engineering sections. The readings showed that someone was using equipment in areas that were supposed to be abandoned. When she asked Jiho about it, his explanation seemed reasonable, but his nervous behavior told a different story. On a cold Thursday morning, Yuna decided to conduct a surprise security sweep of the lower levels. She did not tell anyone about her plans, not even her security team. If Jiho was doing something he should not be doing, she wanted to catch him in the act. Meanwhile, Jiho was having breakfast with the Villani family in their hidden home. Little Duri was showing him a new drawing of a spaceship, while Somi worked on solving a complex engineering problem that had been puzzling the station's technical staff for months. Look, Jiho, Duri said excitedly, holding up his picture. I drew the big ship that came yesterday. It had lights that change colors. That is beautiful, Duri, Jiho said, examining the detailed drawing. The child had an amazing ability to notice and remember small details that most people missed. Kira was preparing her morning medicines, grinding dried plants into powder with tools that Nail had made from scrap metal. The sweet smell of healing herbs filled the air, making the maintenance bay feel warm and homey. I think I have found a solution to the water recycling problem in Section 12, Somi announced, looking up from her calculations. If we adjust the filtration sequence and add a secondary purification step, the efficiency should improve by 18%. Jiho smiled with pride. In just a few weeks, Somi had become better at solving engineering problems than most of the trained technicians on the station. Her fresh perspective and natural talent were remarkable. You should be studying at the engineering academy, Jiho told her. You have more ability than most graduates. Somi looked sad for a moment. On our homeworld, I was planning to attend the science university. But now, she shrugged, not finishing the sentence. Do not give up on your dreams, Jiho said gently. When this situation is resolved, I will help you find a way to continue your education. Nail looked up from his latest sculpture, a delicate piece made from crystalline fragments he had found in the station's mineral processing waste. You have already given us so much hope, friend Jiho. We cannot ask for more. You are not asking, Jiho replied. I am offering. Family helps family. The word hung in the air between them. Somewhere over the past month, that is what they had become. Not just a human helping aliens, but a chosen family bound together by trust and care. At that moment, they heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Everyone froze. The engineering sections were supposed to be empty during this shift. Jiho usually made sure that no one else would be in the area when he visited the family. The footsteps stopped directly, outside their door. Jiho quickly motioned for the family to hide, behind the large equipment in the back of the room. Kira gathered up her medicine supplies while Nail helped Duri move quietly to safety. Somi grabbed her calculation sheets and the technical manuals that clearly did not belong in an abandoned maintenance bay. 3 sharp knocks echoed. Through the room, "Station security," came a firm female voice. "Open this door immediately." Jiho recognized Captain Yuna's voice. His heart pounded as he realized their secret was about to be discovered. He looked back at the Villani family, now hidden in the shadows, and saw the fear in their violet eyes. "Just a moment," Jiho called out, trying to keep his voice steady. He quickly moved to block the view of the living area they had created. The door slid open and Captain Yuna stepped inside, her hand resting on the security scanner at her belt. She was a small woman, but her presence filled the room with authority. "Engineer Lee," she said, looking around the space with sharp eyes. "This is supposed to be an abandoned maintenance bay. Why are there active power readings coming from this location?" "I have been testing some old equipment," Jiho said, gesturing toward the workbenches, trying to see if any of it can be repaired and put back into service. Yuna walked deeper into the room, her trained eyes taking in every detail. She noticed the hydroponics unit immediately, and her expression hardened. "Testing equipment does not require a food-growing system," she said coldly, "and it certainly does not require sleeping quarters." She had spotted the mattresses and bedding that Jiho had set up for the family. There was no way to explain those away as maintenance equipment. "Captain, I can explain," Jiho began, but Yuna held up her hand to silence him. "Someone has been living here," she stated. "Multiple people based on the amount of bedding and personal items I can see." "Engineer Lee, you are harboring unauthorized personnel on this station." From their hiding place behind the equipment, little Duri started to cough. The stress and fear had triggered his respiratory condition, which sometimes acted up when he was upset. Yuna spun toward the sound, her hand moving to her weapon. "Who is there? Come out immediately." Jiho stepped between the security captain and the hiding family. "Captain, please. Let me explain the situation before you do anything." "Step aside, Engineer Lee," Yuna commanded. "I need to see who you are hiding." "They are refugees," Jiho said quickly. "A family with children. They have nowhere else to go." "That is not your decision to make," Yuna replied sharply. "Step aside now, or I will have you arrested for obstruction of security operations." Knowing he had no choice, Jiho moved away from the equipment. "Please come out," he called softly to the family. "It is going to be okay." Nael emerged first, his pale fur seeming to glow in the room's artificial light. He moved with dignity despite his fear, keeping himself between the security officer and his family. Kira followed, holding little Duri in her arms as he continued to cough weakly. Somi came last, her young face showing a mixture of terror and resignation. Captain Yuna stared at the Villani family in shock. She had seen many different alien species during her career, but never any that looked like these pale, ethereal beings. Villani, she whispered, recognizing the species from security briefings. I thought they were all in the refugee camps in the outer systems. These 4 escaped when their world was destroyed, Jiho explained. They came here seeking asylum, but they ran out of money for docking fees. Security evicted them from their quarters, but they had nowhere else to go. Yuna looked at the family, then back at Jiho. Do you understand what you have done? Harboring undocumented aliens is a serious crime. You could face 10 years in a galactic prison. I know the law, Jiho said quietly. But I also know what is right. This family needed help. The law exists for good reasons, Yuna replied. We cannot have unauthorized people living on the station. It creates security risks and health hazards. Little Duri's coughing grew worse, and Kira began speaking to him in soothing Villani words while gently rubbing his back. The child was clearly frightened and sick, and the stress of being discovered was making his condition worse. He needs medical attention, Jiho said urgently. Please, whatever you do to me, make sure the child gets help. Captain Yuna looked at the sick child and felt her resolve waver slightly. But duty was duty, and rules were rules. I am placing all of you under arrest, she said formally. The Villani family will be transferred to Detention Facility 7 pending deportation. Engineer Lee, you will be charged with harboring unauthorized aliens and theft of station resources. Captain, please, Jiho begged. Give me a chance to explain their situation to Director Choi. Maybe there is a legal way to help them. The time for explanations was before you decided to break the law, Yuna replied. She activated her communicator. Security team to Maintenance Bay 15. I need an arrest detail and medical transport for 4 Villani subjects. As they waited for the security team to arrive, Jiho knelt down beside little Duri. The child looked up at him with trusting violet eyes, not understanding what was happening but sensing that something bad was coming. I am sorry, Jiho whispered to the family. I tried to keep you safe. Nail placed a gentle hand on Jiho's shoulder. You gave us hope when we had none. You showed us that there are still kind beings in the universe. We will never forget your friendship. Within minutes, the maintenance bay was filled with security officers. The Villani family was separated from Jiho and led away toward the detention facilities. Little Duri reached out toward Jiho as they took him away, tears streaming down his pale face. Captain Yuna watched the scene with professional detachment, but something about the child's tears bothered her more than she wanted to admit. Engineer Lee, she said as her officers placed restraints on Jiho's hands. You will appear before Director Choi Hana tomorrow morning for formal charges. Until then, you will be held in security detention. As they led him away, Jiho took one last look at the hidden home he had created for the Villani family. The memory tree that Nail had made still glowed softly in the corner, its branches seeming to dance in farewell. The warm, loving space that had sheltered a refugee family was now just an empty room again, cold and silent. But the love and hope that had filled it could not be erased so easily. News traveled fast through the human quarters of Nexus Station. By the time the morning shift began, everyone knew that Lee Jiho had been arrested for hiding an alien family in the engineering sections. Some people shook their heads and said he had brought trouble on himself, but others began asking questions. Kim Tae-hyun was one of the first to visit Jiho in detention. As a senior engineer, he had worked alongside Jiho for 3 years and respected his careful, thoughtful approach to everything he did. If Jiho had broken the rules, there had to be a good reason. Why did you do it? Tae-hyun asked when he sat across from Jiho in the small visiting room. Jiho looked tired but not defeated. Because they needed help and no one else would give it to them. Tell me about them, Tae-hyun said quietly. For the next hour, Jiho described the Villani family. He talked about Kira's knowledge of medicine, Nail's artistic gifts, Somi's brilliant mind, and little Duri's brave spirit. He explained how they had lost their homeworld and how other species rejected them because of foolish superstitions. The child is sick, Jiho said, his voice breaking slightly. He needs proper medical care, not a cold detention cell. Tae-hyun listened carefully. He had expected to hear about some kind of criminal activity or dangerous situation. Instead, He heard the story of a family trying to survive and a friend trying to help them. "What can I do?" Taehyun asked. That simple question started everything. Dr. Shin Yoonji received an unexpected visitor that afternoon. Kim Taehyun knocked on her medical office door and asked if she could spare a few minutes to talk about the Villani family that had been arrested. "I heard about them," Dr. Shin said, gesturing for him to sit down. 4 refugees, including a sick child. They were brought to the detention medical bay this morning. "You have seen them?" Taehyun asked with surprise. "I was called in to examine the child," Dr. Shin explained. "Standard procedure for all detainees. The little one has a respiratory condition that is common among Villani children." "Is it serious?" Dr. Shin paused, choosing her words carefully. "It is treatable, but it requires specific medications in a clean environment. The detention facility is not the best place for a sick child." Taehyun leaned forward. "Doctor, what do you know about Villani biochemistry?" "Very little," she admitted. "They are a rare species and most medical databases have limited information about them." "Why do you ask?" "The mother, Kira, was apparently a healer on their home world. Lee Ji-ho told me she had incredible knowledge about plant medicines and biochemistry." Dr. Shin raised an eyebrow. "That is interesting. We have been struggling with a bacterial infection that has been affecting several species on the station. The standard treatments are not working very well. Maybe she could help," Taehyun suggested. Later that day, Dr. Shin made an unusual request. She asked Captain Yuna for permission to interview Kira about Villani medical practices. It was not a normal procedure, but Dr. Shin explained that it might help with current medical problems on the station. The meeting took place in a small interview room at the detention facility. Kira sat across from Dr. Shin, her pale fur dulled by stress and worry. She had been separated from her family and was clearly frightened. "I am Dr. Shin," the human woman said gently. "I am here to learn about your medical knowledge. I understand you are a healer on your homeworld." Kira nodded slowly. "I studied the healing properties of plants and how to combine them into medicines." "We have a problem here on the station," Dr. Shin explained. "A bacterial infection that is not responding well to our usual treatments. I was wondering if Villani medicine might have some solutions." For the first time since her arrest, Kira's eyes showed interest instead of fear. "What are the symptoms?" Dr. Shin described the infection that had been affecting dozens of people from different species. As she talked, Kira began asking detailed questions about the bacteria's behavior and the treatments that had already been tried. "On Velan, we had similar problems," Kira said thoughtfully. "There's a combination of 3 common plants that creates a powerful medicine against such infections. The plants grow in many places, including space stations like this one." "Show me," Dr. Shin said, sliding a tablet across the table. Kira began drawing the plants and explaining how they should be prepared and combined. Her knowledge was detailed and practical, clearly based on years of experience and study. Dr. Shin was amazed. The solution Kira described was elegant and used materials that were readily available on the station. It was also completely different from the approach the medical team had been taking. "This could work," Dr. Shin said with excitement. "Would you be willing to help us prepare this medicine?" Kira looked surprised. "You would trust me to help even though I am a prisoner." "Knowledge has no citizenship," Dr. Shin replied, "and healing should have no borders." Meanwhile, in another part of the station, teacher Namboa was having her own revelation. She had heard about the arrested Villani family from her colleague Kim Taehyun, who had mentioned that the teenage daughter was apparently brilliant at mathematics. Namboa taught advanced mathematics at the station's educational center. She was always looking for gifted students and was curious about this young alien who supposedly had such talent. She arranged to visit Somi in detention, officially to assess her educational needs as required by galactic refugee protocols. Somi sat quietly in the interview room, her violet eyes showing intelligence and sadness in equal measure. She had been separated from her parents and little brother, and the uncertainty was clearly weighing on her. "I am Teacher Nam," the human woman said kindly. "I understand you enjoy mathematics." Somi nodded hesitantly. "Numbers make sense to me. They follow patterns that are the same everywhere in the universe." Namboa pulled out a tablet with several complex mathematical problems. "These are problems that our senior students work on. Would you like to try solving one?" Somi looked at the first problem, a complex equation involving space navigation calculations. She studied it for a few minutes, then began working. Her approach was unlike anything Namboa had seen before. Instead of following the standard methods taught in schools, Somi found elegant shortcuts that reduced a problem that usually took hours into something that could be solved in minutes. Her solutions were not only correct but showed deep understanding of mathematical principles. "Where did you learn to do this?" Namboa asked in amazement. "I did not learn it," Somi replied quietly. "I just see the patterns. Mathematics is like a language that describes how the universe works." Namboa realized she was looking at a mathematical genius. This young Villani had abilities that were truly extraordinary. That evening, something unprecedented happened in the human quarters of Nexus Station. Kim Taehyun, Dr. Shin Yoonji, and teacher Namboa met in Taehyun's apartment to share what they had learned about the Villani family. "The mother could revolutionize how we treat certain diseases," Dr. Shin reported. "Her knowledge is incredible." "The daughter is a mathematical prodigy," Namboa added. "She solved problems in minutes that take our best students hours." And Lee Ji-ho said the father is an artist and the little boy is remarkably bright despite his illness, Taehyun concluded. "This is not just any refugee family. These are people with extraordinary gifts. So what do we do about it?" Dr. Shin asked. The three friends looked at each other. They all knew that rules were rules, and the Villani family was scheduled for deportation in less than 48 hours. But they also knew that losing these people would be a tragedy not just for the family, but for the entire station community. "We need to talk to other people," Taehyun said slowly. "If enough humans support them, maybe Director Choi will listen." "What about the other species on the station?" Namboa asked. "Will they care?" Dr. Shin thought about this. "Some of them might if they understand what the family can contribute. The medical knowledge alone could help beings from many different worlds." As word spread through the human community, something remarkable began to happen. People who had never met the Villani family started asking questions about their situation. They learned about the destroyed homeworld, the prejudice the family faced, and the contributions they could make to station life. Engineer Park Min-ho, Ji-ho's supervisor, began to understand why his usually rule-following employee had taken such risks. Security officer Yang Do-hyun, who had helped arrest the family, started having doubts about whether deportation was the right solution. Even Captain Yuna found herself thinking about little Duri's tears and wondering if there might be another way to handle the situation. But the most important development happened when several alien species representatives began receiving visits from concerned humans. Dr. Shin spoke to the Altarian Medical Council about Kira's knowledge. Namboa discussed Somi's abilities with the Educational Advisory Board that included members from 6 different species. Slowly, carefully, the humans began building a case that this was not just about helping one family. It was about what kind of community they wanted Nexus Station to be. The question was whether they could build enough support before the deportation order was carried out. Time was running out, but hope was growing. The morning of the deportation arrived gray and cold. The Villani family was scheduled to leave Nexus Station at noon on a transport ship bound for Detention Center Omega, a facility known throughout the galaxy for its harsh conditions and long waiting times. Lee Ji-ho sat in his cell, staring at the wall and thinking about little Duri. The child would be locked away from the stars he loved so much, probably for years while their asylum case crawled through the galactic legal system. The thought made Ji-ho feel sick with guilt and helplessness. At 8 in the morning, something unexpected happened. Kim Taehyun appeared outside the detention facility, but he was not alone. Behind him stood dozens of other humans from the station. Engineers, doctors, teachers, shop owners, maintenance workers, and families with children. They carried signs written in multiple languages, all saying the same thing: "Let the Villani family stay." Captain Yuna watched the growing crowd from her office window with growing concern. Peaceful protests were legal on the station, but this was the largest gathering she had seen in years. More people were arriving every few minutes. Dr. Shin Yoonji stood at the front of the crowd with a petition in her hands. Over the past 18 hours, she had gathered signatures from 347 humans who supported allowing the Villani family to remain on the station. But more importantly, she had documentation of Kira's medical contributions. "We demand a hearing before Director Choi Hana," Dr. Shin announced to Captain Yuna when the security chief came out to address the crowd. "We have new evidence that changes everything about this case." The deportation order has already been signed, Captain Yuna replied. The family will be transferred as scheduled. Then we will stand here until Director Choi agrees to review their case, Kim Tae-hyun said firmly. These people are not criminals. They are refugees who can help our entire community. Teacher Nam Boa stepped forward with her own tablet full of data. The teenage daughter solved mathematical problems in 20 minutes that usually take our senior students 6 hours. She has insights that could improve our navigation systems and make space travel safer for everyone. Captain Yuna looked at the determined faces in the crowd. These were not troublemakers or political activists. These were ordinary station residents who genuinely believed they were doing the right thing. I will contact Director Choi, she said finally, but I cannot guarantee she will change her decision. As word of the protest spread through the station, something remarkable began to happen. Representatives from other alien species started arriving to see what was going on. The first to appear was Ambassador Keth of the Altarian Medical Council. The tall, blue-skinned alien had heard about Kira's proposed solution to the bacterial infection problem from Dr. Shin. As someone who had lost colleagues to similar diseases, he was very interested in learning more. Is it true that the Villani healer has knowledge that could help treat the spreading infection? Ambassador Keth asked Dr. Shin. She has already provided a treatment formula that looks very promising, Dr. Shin replied. But if she is deported, we will lose access to her expertise. Ambassador Keth looked thoughtful. The Altarians were known for their practical approach to problems. If the Villani woman could save lives, politics should not get in the way. Next came Professor Vell from the Educational Advisory Board. The insect-like being had reviewed the mathematical work that Teacher Nam had submitted, and was impressed despite herself. The young Villani's approach to complex calculations is unique, Professor Vell admitted to Nam Boa. Her methods could advance mathematical understanding across multiple species. As more alien representatives arrived, the human protesters found themselves in conversations they had never expected to have. Engineer Park Min-ho explained to a group of traders how the family had been living peacefully and productively for weeks without causing any problems. A human family with young children talked to alien parents about how little Duri's friendship had brought joy to their own kids during the brief time they had met. By 10 in the morning, the crowd had grown to include not just humans, but dozens of aliens from 8 different species. What had started as a human protest was becoming something much larger. Director Choi Hana finally arrived at 11, just 1 hour before the scheduled deportation. The stern woman looked out at the mixed crowd of humans and aliens with surprise. In 15 years of running the station, she had never seen such a diverse group united for a single cause. I understand there are concerns about the Villani deportation, Director Choi announced to the crowd. However, station regulations are clear about undocumented residents. Dr. Shin stepped forward. Director, we request an emergency hearing to present new evidence about this family's potential contributions to station operations. What kind of evidence? Director Choi asked. Medical knowledge that could save lives, mathematical insights that could improve safety systems, and artistic abilities that could enhance community life, Dr. Shin replied. This family has extraordinary gifts that could benefit everyone on this station. Ambassador Keth spoke up from the crowd. The Altarian Medical Council supports this request for a hearing. If the Villani healer's knowledge can help treat diseases that affect multiple species, this becomes a matter of galactic health importance. Professor Vell added her voice. The Educational Advisory Board also supports a review. The young Villani's mathematical abilities could advance space navigation safety for all species. Director Choi looked around at the crowd. Representatives from 8 different species were all nodding in agreement. This was not just about human sentiment anymore. It was about practical benefits that could help the entire station community. Very well, Director Choi said finally. I will convene an emergency council session in 1 hour. Representatives from all interested species may present evidence. But I warn you that any decision must still comply with galactic refugee laws. The crowd cheered, but the celebration was brief. Everyone knew this was just the beginning of a difficult fight. Inside the detention facility, the Villani family huddled together in their cell, unaware of the massive effort being made on their behalf. Little Duri was feeling worse, stressed by the uncertainty and confined conditions. Kira held him close while Nail and Somi tried to comfort each other. What will happen to us? Somi asked quietly. I do not know, Nail replied honestly. But I know that Lee Ji-ho tried to help us. And that means there are good people in the universe. Meanwhile, Lee Ji-ho was finally released from his cell to appear at the emergency hearing. As the guards led him through the corridors, he was amazed to see crowds of people still gathered outside, waiting for news. Kim Tae-hyun rushed over to him. Ji-ho, we are fighting for them. The whole station is watching. What do you mean? Ji-ho asked in confusion. Dr. Shin has been working with Kira on medical research. Teacher Nam discovered that Somi is a mathematical genius. People from different species are supporting the family now. Ji-ho felt a surge of hope mixed with disbelief. You really think Director Choi might change her mind? I think we have given her good reasons to consider it, Tae-hyun replied. But we need you to tell the council why you chose to help them in the first place. The emergency council session took place in the station's main conference hall. Director Choi sat at the head of a long table surrounded by representatives from 9 different species. The viewing gallery was packed with station residents who had come to witness the proceedings. The Villani family was brought in under guard and seated at a small table in the center of the room. Little Duri looked pale and frightened, while his parents and sister tried to appear brave despite their obvious fear. Lee Ji-ho was called to testify first. As he walked to the front of the room, he saw hundreds of faces looking at him expectantly. Many were human, but many others belonged to alien species he barely recognized. Engineer Lee, Director Choi said formally, you stand accused of harboring undocumented aliens and theft of station resources. However, before we proceed with sentencing, this council will hear evidence about the potential value of allowing this family to remain on the station. Ji-ho looked at the Villani family, then at the crowd in the gallery, and finally at the council members. Director Choi, council members, I broke the rules because I found a family in need and I could not turn my back on them. But what I discovered over the following weeks was that they had as much to give as they needed to receive. He began to tell the story of his time with the family. He described Kira's medical knowledge, Nail's artistic gifts, Somi's mathematical brilliance, and Duri's joyful spirit. As he spoke, he saw some of the council members leaning forward with interest. These are not just refugees seeking charity, Ji-ho concluded. These are people with extraordinary abilities who could make our entire community stronger and better. Dr. Shin was called next to present her medical findings. She explained how Kira's treatment for the bacterial infection had already shown promising results in preliminary tests. Teacher Nam followed with examples of Somi's mathematical work, demonstrating solutions that could improve station systems and space navigation safety. As the evidence mounted, the mood in the room began to shift. What had started as a simple deportation hearing was becoming a discussion about what kind of community Nexus Station wanted to be. The most powerful moment came when little Duri, despite his illness, asked permission to speak. In halting but clear galactic standard language, the 6-year-old stood up and said, "We just want to help and to belong somewhere. We promise to be good." Even Director Choi looked moved by the child's simple words. The formal vote would come soon, but already it was clear that something fundamental had changed on Nexus Station that day. The most powerful moment came when little Duri, despite his illness, asked permission to speak. In halting but clear galactic standard language, the 6-year-old stood up and said, "We just want to help and to belong somewhere. We promise to be good." Even Director Choi looked moved by the child's simple words. The formal vote would come soon, but already it was clear that something fundamental had changed on Nexus Station that day. The council chamber fell silent as Director Choi Hannah prepared to announce the decision. The Villani family sat together, holding hands as they waited to learn their fate. Little Duri had fallen asleep against his mother's shoulder, exhausted from his brave speech to the council. In the gallery, humans and aliens waited together with nervous anticipation. Lee Ji-ho stood between Kim Tae-hyun and Dr. Shin Yoon-ji, his heart pounding as he watched Director Choi's face for any hint of what was coming. "This council has heard compelling evidence today," Director Choi began slowly. "We have learned that the Villani family possesses knowledge and abilities that could significantly benefit our station community. However, we must also consider the legal framework that governs refugee status and immigration procedures." The director paused, looking directly at the Villani family. After careful consideration and consultation with the Galactic Refugee Commission, This council has decided to grant the Villani family temporary asylum status pending a full immigration hearing. The gallery erupted in cheers. Humans and aliens alike stood up and applauded as Nail and Kira hugged each other with tears of relief streaming down their faces. Somi covered her mouth with her hands, hardly daring to believe what she had heard, but Director Choi was not finished. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented today, the station will offer immediate employment contracts to qualified family members. Kira will be invited to join our medical research team. Somi will be enrolled in our advanced engineering program with full scholarship support. Dr. Shin felt tears in her own eyes as she watched the family's joy. This was more than they had dared to hope for. As for engineer Lee Ji-ho, Director Choi continued, while his methods were against regulations, his actions have led to discoveries that will benefit our entire community. The charges against him are hereby dropped, and he will receive a commendation for humanitarian service. Ji-ho felt weak with relief. Not only was he free, but the family he had grown to love would be safe and welcomed into the community. The formal proceedings ended, but the real celebration was just beginning. As the Villani family left the council chamber, they were surrounded by well-wishers from dozens of different species. Children who had heard about Little Dury brought him drawings and small toys. Scientists eager to work with Kira introduced themselves and shared their research interests. 6 months later, the transformation was remarkable. Nexus Station had become a different place, warmer and more welcoming than it had ever been before. Kira had become the head of the new multi-species medical research center. Her innovative treatments using natural compounds had already saved dozens of lives and attracted researchers from across the galaxy. The bacterial infection that had been plaguing the station was completely eliminated using her plant-based medicine. The research center had become a model for other facilities, showing how traditional knowledge from different cultures could be combined with modern science to create breakthrough treatments. Kira often said that her greatest joy was not just healing people, but teaching others how healing could bring communities together. Nail had established the station's first interspecies art therapy program. His beautiful sculptures now decorated public spaces throughout Nexus Station, and his art classes brought together beings from many different worlds. Children who had never spoken to aliens before were now creating artwork alongside young beings from a dozen different species. His memory tree, carefully moved from the old maintenance bay, now stood in the station's central plaza. It had become a symbol of hope and renewal, where people gathered to share stories and celebrate important moments in their lives. Somi had not only excelled in the engineering program, she had become its youngest instructor. At 17, she was teaching advanced mathematics to students twice her age and helping redesign the station's navigation systems. Her innovations had already been adopted by 3 other space stations, making space travel safer for millions of beings. More importantly, Somi had become a bridge between species. Her natural curiosity and gift for languages had made her a translator and cultural interpreter, helping new refugees and immigrants adapt to station life. Little Dury had grown healthy and strong, his respiratory problems completely cured thanks to his mother's medicines and the clean environment of their new home. He attended the station school where his teachers marveled at his creativity and kindness. Despite being the youngest student in his class, he often helped other children with their problems and was beloved by classmates from many different worlds. But perhaps the most important change was harder to see, but easier to feel. The atmosphere on Nexus Station had shifted from one of mere tolerance to active acceptance. The success of the Villani family had opened minds and hearts throughout the community. Other refugee families began arriving, no longer automatically turned away because of prejudice or fear. The station established new programs to help immigrants integrate into the community while maintaining their cultural identities. What had started as one family's desperate situation had grown into a systematic approach to building a truly inclusive society. Lee Ji-ho had been promoted to Chief Integration Engineer, a new position created specifically for him. His job was to help ensure that the station's facilities could accommodate the needs of different species while maintaining safety and efficiency. More importantly, he had become an unofficial advocate for newcomers, helping them navigate the complex process of starting a new life on the station. On quiet evenings, Ji-ho still visited the Villani family in their new apartment in the residential sector. They would share meals and stories, watching the stars through the large windows that Dury had requested. The child still loved to draw pictures of the ships that came and went, but now he drew them with hope instead of fear. "Do you ever regret it?" Kira asked Jiho one evening as they watched Dury teach a complicated card game to Somi. "Breaking the rules for us, I mean. It could have cost you everything." Jiho smiled as he watched the family that had become his chosen relatives. "How can I regret something that brought so much good into the world?" The impact of their story had spread far beyond Nexus Station. News reports about the Pale Cat family and the human engineer who had risked everything to help them had reached worlds throughout the galaxy. The story had become a symbol of hope for refugees everywhere and had influenced policy changes on dozens of worlds. Other species had begun to examine their own prejudices and assumptions about different alien groups. The phrase Nexus Accords had entered galactic vocabulary to describe new policies that prioritized individual merit and humanitarian considerations over species-based discrimination. Dr. Shin often said that the medical breakthroughs achieved through collaboration with Kira had shown the scientific community how much they could accomplish when they looked beyond traditional boundaries. The success had inspired similar programs on research stations throughout the galaxy. Teacher Nam had used Somi's example to argue for more inclusive educational opportunities for gifted students, regardless of their species or economic status. Several universities had created scholarship programs specifically for refugee students who showed exceptional abilities. As the first anniversary of their arrival approached, the Villani family was preparing for a special celebration, not just for themselves but for the entire station community that had embraced them. Dury, now a confident 7-year-old, was working on a special art project with his father for the occasion. "What are you making?" Jiho asked when he found them working together in Niall's studio. "A new memory tree," Dury explained seriously. "But this one will not just remember the past. It will help people dream about the future." The tree they were creating was indeed different from the first one. Instead of just showing Villani memories, it incorporated symbols and elements from all the species living on the station. It was a vision of unity that grew from diversity, of strength that came from including rather than excluding. On the night of the celebration, thousands of beings gathered in the central plaza to see the new memory tree unveiled. As the lights came on, the sculpture seemed to dance with representations of different worlds, different cultures, and different dreams all intertwined into something beautiful and unified. Director Choi Hana spoke to the crowd, officially declaring the date as Annual Unity Day, a celebration of what could be accomplished when communities chose compassion over fear. "1 year ago, a human engineer made a choice to help a family in need," she said. "That choice led to discoveries, innovations, and friendships that have made all of our lives better. But most importantly, it reminded us that our differences are not weaknesses to be feared, but strengths to be celebrated." As the celebration continued late into the night, Jiho found himself standing with the Villani family beneath their new memory tree. Above them, the stars shone through the station's transparent dome, the same stars that had once seemed so far away to a sick little boy hiding in the darkness. "Thank you," Nail said quietly, "for seeing us as family before we were family." Jiho looked around at the diverse crowd celebrating together, at the children from different species playing games together, at the scientists and artists and teachers who had learned from each other across cultural boundaries. "Thank you," he replied, "for teaching me what family really means." The Pale Cat family was no longer unwanted. They had found their home among the stars, and in doing so they had helped create a better home for everyone.